Hello, everyone. My name is Jared. I'm one of the team members at Podcast Movement, and I'm delighted today to share with you my friend, Aaron Woods. Aaron, of course, is the founder and the leader over at Podpal, one of the leaders. And Aaron, first of all, congratulations, because you and your wife just had your fourth child, I believe, at the beginning of the summer. Or just recently. So I got to say, considering, you've had all these different things going on, you look like you're awake and caffeinated and ready to rock.
Sorry, Jared. I think I lost your audio there. I don't know what happened, but it just dropped off.
Okay. Well, I can hear you. And I was just basically telling people about you and your wife having your fourth child.
Sorry, I lost audio there for a second. I don't know what happened. It just dropped off randomly. I heard you had congratulations and child, so I'm assuming that you said congratulations on the new baby. So let's go with that.
Yeah, not a problem. So today we're talking about how to streamline your podcast workflow. Aaron, if you could start out maybe just telling a little bit about yourself, a little bit about Podpage, and then we'll just jump right in.
Sure. Well, you said Podpage. I think you meant Podpal, but that's okay.
I did mean Podpal. I apologize. Podpal. Sorry.
There's a lot out there, right? I'm the founder and CEO of Podpal. I originally came up with the idea a couple of years ago while my wife was getting started with her first podcast and was struggling to kind of get her show off the ground and really dealing with podcast management type issues, which is what we're going to talk about today. Everything from, scheduling her guests to managing her production workflow. Like many podcasters, she got into it because she had great content to share, and she was really excited and passionate about her subject, which in her case was encouraging and inspiring women. But very quickly, her podcast became this huge administrative burden for her, and it just became not fun, right? And as a content creator, you ultimately want to spend more of your time building content and impacting the audience that you started your show to entertain in the first place. And so, through just kind of helping my wife, even with her own podcast projects, that led me to develop the software solution known as Podpal. And we're going live actually with our launch right before Podcast Movement. So August 1st is sort of our launch date. So if you are also struggling with podcast management, I highly recommend that you do check us out at podpal.com. And hopefully I can share just, some practical tips. I'm going to give some pro tips today that will help you regardless if you use our software or not. So let's get into that, how to plan, publish, and promote your podcast without all of the stress and clutter, which there's a lot of that for a lot of people. I've talked to over 200 or more podcasters one-on-one at this point, and many of them are struggling with these very things. So the first pro tip that I have for anyone wanting to reduce the stress and the clutter around content creation for podcasting is, number one, know your audience. Something that, again, a lot of the strategies that I'm going to offer up today really come from agile project management best practices, from my experience. My background prior to getting into technology was in engineering and manufacturing. I worked for Boeing. I'm aware of leaning out systems, and for those of you lean product type people or project management people, you've probably heard of the Toyota way, and different methods used in manufacturing. The very same methods can be used to manage your podcast, because a podcast is a project like anything else. And one of the very first things you need to know when you're doing any sort of putting together any kind of product is, who is that product for, right? So knowing your audience is number one. I highly recommend putting together what I call a target listener profile. So that should include some demographic information, like the age of your target listener, where they might live, what their social or ethnic makeup might be for your particular sort of niche for your podcast. What are some of their hobbies and interests? And then really the key thing, what is their problem or pain point that they might have? That can be anything from from wanting to be educated on, let's say, how to buy a house, or marketing best practices, or just the need to laugh, right? They're having a rough day and you want to give them that comedic relief. So, you need to be very clear and very specific about what problem you're solving for your target listener. And then what are some of their needs, desires, or goals? That will help also round out sort of your understanding of who your audience is and why they would value your content. And that's going to, again, take a lot of stress and a lot of pressure off of you as you get into the content creation and the workflow management side of things, because now you know who you're talking to, you know why they need the content that you're creating, and you know ultimately what they're going to sort of benefit or gain from the information or the entertainment that you give them. My next pro tip is record in batches. Any podcaster who's down the path, a couple of episodes, probably understands the value of recording in batches. Those that did it are like, yay, I'm so glad I did this. Those who didn't are really hating life and wishing that they had put a couple of podcasts in the queue before launching their show. Because as it just, the nature of the beast is that you put out episodes, and now you're as soon as you start actually releasing content, everything else piles on top. The social media aspects and marketing your show, finding more guests, recording additional episodes. So what I highly recommend is thinking about your production sort of schedule over the course of a year, kind of seasonal, in a seasonal fashion. So imagine that, you have already prepared a spring batch and you're going to launch January 1 with your show. So now you have that spring batch of, I recommend 15 episodes, 20 if you can. And you're going to schedule those out to automatically, publish at regular intervals, let's say weekly. So that's going to give you somewhere between 4 to 5 months before you need to actually have another episode ready, episode 16, ready to go, right? So over the course of that time, that's when you'll be recording your new episodes, and that would become your summer batch, which would release at the end of that 4 or 5 month about period. And same thing for fall and winter. And this will kind of keep you from burning out, right? In my research and studies of podcasters, the average podcaster is actually quitting by episode 7 or 8. And that is largely due to the administrative burden of podcast management, and also sort of the lack of, I would say, efficient tools made for this and that are tailored for podcasting, which is why we're doing what we're doing at Podpal. So, it's really important that you get some in the hatcher, right? Get some on deck, and then manage sort of even the development of those new recordings or those new episodes in a very methodical, sort of agile fashion, which we'll get into next. So the next pro tip is to map your workflow. So again, remember in the last slide where we had the red line saying you're recording new episodes in between those batches. So what you're looking at here is somewhat of a Kanban board, right? Many people in project management have probably seen something like this, but every single sticky note here would represent sort of an episode, a new episode. And we're wanting to move those episodes from a new idea to being published, right? And there's going to be several things that we're going to need to do in order to get it from A to B. So I highly recommend sort of mapping out whatever your workflow is. This does differ from podcast to podcast, depending on if you are just you have a show where you're the host and there are no guests, versus if you have a guest on, every single show, and you have a co-host and you have a team, the level of difficulty and involvement will usually increase the more sophisticated your show becomes. And that's really where the power of podcast management really comes into play. Not only that, you have now podcast management agencies who would be managing the release and scheduling of episodes for not one show, but 2 show 3 shows or more. In fact, one of the folks that I've talked to who owns a podcast management agency, he's managing 18 podcasts at one time. And so, more and more agencies are coming up because they realize that, hey, this is a problem. I want to start a service that helps cater to people who want help with this. But even these agencies need a methodical way of sort of managing the workflow. So as you can see here, you have a new episode idea, and then let's say, you're moving that sticky along the path until it's complete. So you've invited your guests, you place it in the invite guests column. Once you're done with that, you move it over to record episode and so on and so forth. I also highly, if you are using a paper process or a program, we'll get into programs and applications in a minute. I highly recommend, categorizing your episodes into themes. So in this case, imagine that each of these different color sticky notes represents a different theme. And let's say that it's a business podcast. And so everything that's a blue sticky is a episode about marketing. Everything that's yellow is an episode about advertising. Everything that's pink is an episode about pricing. So this is very helpful because then as you accumulate and publish episodes here at the end, you have a really good visual indication of really how much you're talking about a given subject. And once again, you can tie that then back to your target audience, target listener profile, and you can make sure that, okay, yeah, the things that I'm producing are matching the interest, the goals, the needs, desires, the pain points of my target listener. Finally, the last pro tip I really have for you guys today is to automate repetitive processes and steps. There's a ton of applications out there. Anyone who's been podcasting for a minute now knows that there's a billion of them, right? But right now, I'm really talking about those that would sort of minimize manual repetitive tasks. Let's take Calendly as an example. I know that about 75% of all podcasters use Calendly for scheduling their guest interviews because this allows you to put together sort of a template of an invite to them. It lets you set up your recurring availability, right? It allows for easy rescheduling if someone has a conflict that comes up, and it automatically will, resend the new calendar invite to whoever your guest is. Things like that are invaluable when you talk about saving time, reducing stress, reducing clutter. Let's talk about sort of that Kanban flow that we just went over. You could build something like that in Asana or Trello, which are not made for podcast management specifically, but they are made for project management. So you can set up a project there, set up those flow boards and things like that. Descript helps you to automatically transcribe your podcast and get all the words out. So that way you can maybe post that on your blog or in some other form of media or in your show notes. So I won't go too much into all of these, but essentially, Podpal is also another tool that would allow you to do that. And I would say that, at least for us, one of the advantages is that we're also a hosting company. So, what I'm really after and really passionate about is providing sort of a system that is built for podcasting that allows you to manage, reduce this stress, but also you can host your show there, you can publish it, you can do pretty much the full workflow. So if you have any questions about any of these applications, I'm happy to answer. But more importantly, I think that if you follow these 4 sort of pro tips, you're going to reduce quite a bit of stress in your life. You'll have a podcast that can run smoothly for 1 year or more without burning out and without feeling this huge burden on your own time to where you become a podcast administrator instead of a content creator. So that's really what we're passionate about. I thank you guys for joining. I know this was short and sweet, but hopefully impactful. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer those at this time.
Absolutely. So first of all, thank you, Aaron. And let's see. We had a question here from Seema. Well, it's a note. I end up procrastinating on writing the show notes, listening to the show, even though I have someone who posts on social for me. I'm guessing you've never ran into that. Aaron, no? Okay. Are you able to hear me, Aaron? Not able to hear me?
No, I wasn't.
Okay. So Seema wants to know where to sign up for the beta version. Aaron, it looks like we can't hear you all of a sudden. I'm not sure what happened there. Aaron, can you hear me? Okay, I'm going to put this in the chat. We have
How about now?
Podpal. Oh, there you are. Yeah, I kind of dipped out there for a second.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm not. Yeah, it's podpal.com. So just podpal.com at the very bottom, there's a form. And fill out that form. And we're also accepting a few podcasters. We only have a couple more slots left into our private beta. So we're actually testing now. So if you email me actually at hello@podpal.com, I'd be happy to give you more information about that as well.
hello@podpal.com.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm putting this in the chat so that people have access to that.
Awesome.
And okay. Because of the kind of going back and forth, why don't we kind of keep this one short today, Aaron?
Sure.
Because I don't want to.
Yeah, it seems like every time we switch, it's mostly when we were switching screens here that it decided to drop off the content. I don't know why.
Well, we mentioned podpal.com. People can check that out. There's a few spots left for beta if people are interested in that. And then people can email you as well that are interested in learning more or have questions. hello@podpal.com. Aaron, thank you. And do you have any kind of final thoughts for anybody that's wanting to streamline what they're doing?
Yeah, like I said, it's important to find a tool that works for you. Really think about that workflow. Really understanding your target listener and map that back to your outcomes. And then tailor it, right? Like go back and make sure that after you've produced it, you look at your analytics, you look at things like that, and see how can you refine your process further. I would say that sharpening your axe before you cut down the tree is a big deal. So get those episodes in the hopper, and talk to other podcasters. See what works, what other people have run into. One of the things that I always encourage everyone is don't reinvent the wheel. Go and talk to folks who are doing it, who may have already struggled with the same things that you've struggled with. Forums, obviously, podcast movement, conference is a great place to show up to and learn more about all the things that are out there and what's happening in the podcasting industry. Also, if you are attending Podcast Movement in Nashville, we will be hosting an event called Podcasters of Color, and just celebrating podcasters of all backgrounds. Please feel free to join that networking event. You'll meet some awesome people. I'll be there. Our team will be there. And we look forward to having a great time in Nashville.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Aaron. We are excited to see you in Nashville. Congratulations again, not just on Podpal, but also to you and your wife on your fourth child, which is very, very exciting. So, Aaron, you've been a very generous member of the podcast community now for a couple of years, and it's just been a pleasure to get to know you and looking forward to your success. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thanks, everybody. Please check out podpal.com, and you can send an email to Aaron, hello@podpal.com. Thanks again.